So it would be an understatement to say that 2020 hasn't really gone the way that most of us planned. But one of the positives of being stuck at home is that I've been able to actually play video games and finally discovered the Uncharted series. So today I'm gonna do something I've never done before. I'm gonna rank a video game franchise. So today we're gonna rank all 5 Uncharted console games from the least best to the best. My name is Sean and I love to talk about movies, and today video games way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of the Uncharted games. I only played through the console games. If you played the handheld Vista game, go ahead and throw that into your ranking as well. I don't have a Vista and I didn't hear very good things about it, so I didn't include that in mine. But as for the main console games, they're all pretty incredible, so this was a fun list to make. Also, my buddy CODY LEACH'S is also ranking the Uncharted games. You can find a link over to his channel and his video right up here or somewhere around here to get a different take on this franchise. I played through these games for the very first time. He's like a long-term fan of the franchise, so you can get 2 different perspectives on the games. And let's get started. In last place is Uncharted Drake's Fortune. While this one is in last place, it's still a great kickoff to this franchise, largely because it introduced us to a great set of main characters. Of course, Nathan Drake is kind of a quintessential adventurer who's not really a hero, but he's not really a villain either. He's right in that middle zone where he's willing to do the right things, but morally ambiguous enough that it's not just so simplistic that you can't have any fun with it. He's also got some great side characters that you want to see him go on more adventures with. You want to see those relationships expanded, whether you're talking about Sully, who's that mentor sort of co-adventurer with him, and then with the love interest that continues on throughout, and they develop that relationship out. All of it really nice. And some of like the first memories I have of like this game locking in of like, this is the moment I was like, oh, I get what this is all about, is when he is on this jet ski escaping with her, shooting flares at barrels. And I was like, this really is something special here. Part of what makes the game unique is how cinematic it feels. It doesn't feel like a video game where it's just you're playing through different levels and it's not just an open world where you can't see how you would adapt this. It feels like you're on the adventure of the movie, and it does a nice job of going back and forth between shootouts, puzzles, moments where the characters are walking along having dialogue. It just flows smoothly the way that a film does and integrates everything with the pacing and everything that feels right and like an obvious thing that could be translated to the big screen. Of course, the other thing that does work so well with it is the variety of the gameplay, that you're going back and forth between this third-person shooter game, puzzles, all sorts of traversing, jumping across things, and just the right amount of all of it that it doesn't feel monotonous and the game doesn't feel stretched out too long. I also didn't know there were any supernatural elements in the Uncharted franchise when I started it, and so I got to the third act of this game like at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and then zombies started jumping out at me. Kind of freaked me out a little bit. Actually made a tweet about it, but a nice little twist inside of it. The reason this one is in last place is simply because all of the sequels expanded on what this game did so well and went deeper with the characters, more complex with the story, and there was massive technological advances even going into the next game in the series. So for that reason, while I thought that this was a great game and an amazing kickoff to the franchise, all of them outdid this game. They out-Uncharted Uncharted, and therefore this one comes in last place, and if this one is in last place, this is a great series. Number 4, Uncharted Lost Legacy. Now this feels less like a full game in and of itself and more like a fantastic expansion of a Thief's End. And that's sort of essentially what the game is, or at least its original design was to be an expansion, and they went, let's release that as its own thing with a reduced price as it's only about half of a game. But as that, it really works quite well. I was skeptical, like, what do I really want to play an Uncharted game without Nathan Drake? I was strongly debating of putting this video out a month ago and just do the 4 main Nathan Drake games. And then CODY LEACH convinced me, like, hey man, I played through it, definitely do Lost Legacy. So I added it in here, and I'm absolutely glad that I did, because it fits perfectly into the franchise. And what it does really nicely is it takes several different side characters from the different games that we've seen interact with Nathan more so than with each other, and constructs a narrative where you go, it makes sense that they would be doing this. They're adventurers that take jobs, and so the fact that they teamed up with each other makes sense, and it adds depth to them, and so it just really worked. And also, building off the game engine for the fourth game, that's a cool game engine, and so there's all sorts of great dynamics, amazing visuals inside of it. And even though it's only kind of like half of a game compared to the other ones, if I was judging this one based off the first act where you're doing all these urban chases in the rain, or the last act where you're doing that train sequence, this one probably would have been higher up on the list. The middle section where you're kind of in this very large map, going to a bunch of different ruins, got a little bit repetitive, and so that kind of held it back for me that was such a large percentage of the game, but really is a fantastic addition, especially at the price point. And if you've played through these games but were nervous about playing one without Nathan Drake, don't be nervous. It absolutely holds up to the usual standards. In third place is Uncharted Drake's Deception. More amazing fun adventures with Nathan Drake. This time it really kind of dove into his backstory a little bit more with a whole series of adventures with him as a kid. And honestly, that's probably the reason that I have this one behind Among Thieves, is because that stuff didn't fully work for me. It wasn't as fun for me with the amount of time we spent with him as a kid as opposed to him on the forward moving adventures. That's the stuff that worked a little bit better for me. But in general, as kind of an immediate follow-up, a quick follow-up to the second game, it just continued with all the stuff that I loved about it, of these big action sequences, plane crash being the one that, even among the whole franchise, being like, wow, that was cool. Like, you feel like you're in this plane crash, dragging behind it with gameplay that works, and it all tied together in such a nice way. It's not as big of a leap forward with the technology as some of the other sequels were. Didn't feel like as big of an expansion, but it did do some nice things. I appreciated that it started kind of in that urban setting at the beginning, and we're going through sewers and stuff like that. So kind of a nice change of pace. But if I was picking between this one and the second one, I think the second one is just a little bit better and a little bit fresher. Real quick, before I give you my top two, be sure to share your ranking down below in the comment section. My list isn't the right list. It's just my list, and I would love to see yours. And keep in mind, this is the first time I've played through these, and I played through all of them over the last 3 months, so I am a fresh take without any history with this franchise. Also, if you don't know, I've done a bunch of other video game reviews before, so yeah, you can check that out right up in this playlist up here. I've got the Star Wars game from last year, Marvel Ultimate Alliance, Spider-Man, PlayStation 4, a bunch of that stuff up there. If you enjoyed this video, there's something there that you'll like. Our runner-up is Uncharted Among Thieves. Now, this game almost ruined my idea to rank this franchise because I got 80% through the game and my saved game crashed. And I lost all of it. All of my progress, like 10, 12 hours of playing, lost all of it. So I just moved on to the third one. I was like, I don't know, if I didn't actually play through the second game, can I rank them? And then in the process of getting Lost Legacy, I found a online saved backup that I didn't know was there. So I was able to make up about half of my lost save stuff. So I finished this game after I finished the other games, came back around to it, and got finished with it. And luckily I did, because it's one of the best Uncharted games, and all of the Uncharted games are some of the best video games out there. It takes everything about the original game and takes it to the next level. There's massive upgrades with the graphics, the technology, the gameplay, to where it's much more advanced. The environments are much more diverse and varied. They feel bigger. There's much more scope to all of it. The train sequence being one of the big standouts, whether you're talking about dangling over the cliff or the part where you're actually on the train in the shootout with people battling helicopters. And then, of course, even in the final act of it, these ruins, battling these supernatural creatures, and then you have to escape on the run on this bridge that's collapsing. All of it just feels like this massive upgrade from what came before. Add to that, the character relationships are much deeper than they were before. You have multiple betrayals. You have a love triangle going on. Plus, everything was solely that worked before. It's still present in this film. And so you just kind of take everything that I loved about the first one, which was a great kickoff, and expand it here. Better gameplay, better characters, better story, and you get an even better game, than a great starting point. But coming in at first place is Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. This is by far the most involved, the biggest, and most impressive of the Uncharted games, as that PlayStation 4 upgrade just opened them up to a whole bunch of new possibilities where every single detail got an upgrade. Of course, the graphics are by far the best of any of the games, but then they incorporated that into the gameplay as well. And so things go a lot smoother when the graphics are much clearer, and it makes it much easier to see what you're supposed to grab hold of. There's little upgrades in the way that that interact with enemies and their awareness of you that adds a little bit more immersion into it. As you have a better vibe of the people around you, you can sneak a little bit better. Little upgrades like adding a rope into the mix seems like it would be like, oh, that's a nice little gimmick that'll add a little something, but it doesn't. It adds multiple new layers of fun to the game, as it feels like something this character would have, and he'd be swinging from a rope like Indiana Jones, and they use it in a bunch of clever ways that are just massive in scope and size. Like when you're being dragged behind a train by your rope, that's a very cool game mechanic, and it works. It's smooth, it's organic, it feels right, and it goes seamlessly into this already existing gameplay that we know, and all the cinematics we already know, and just adds one more layer that just makes everything so much better. Add to that, the story is even bigger, it's more personal, while you're, of course, adding Drake's brother into the mix, and he's a great addition that kind of adds even more moral ambiguity into the character. You have him lying to his wife, you have him trying to retire, going back into it, and it just has such a bigger scope and size to it, as they knew that this is their PlayStation 4 Uncharted game. So let's go all in and tell the biggest story with the most worlds, the biggest maps, the coolest new gameplay, and pretty much all of it paid off for me, as this was the definitive next generation version of Uncharted, and a great way to kind of send off Nathan Drake. So for me, it comes in at number 1. If you've enjoyed this video and want more video game videos from me, check out that playlist right over there. I've got 3 or 4 different video game reviews, a video with my top 10 favorite video games of all time. Remember, over on CODY LEACH'S channel, he's also ranking the Uncharted games. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and video games too much.